All right, let's head deep into one of India's most iconic wildlife reserves, Ranthambhore. But, we're not just here for the star of the show. Nope, we're actually here to solve a really cool ecological detective story. One that's all about the elusive predators living right in the tiger's shadow. I mean, when you hear the name Ranthambhore Tiger Reserve, what's the first animal that pops into your head? It's the tiger, right? The magnificent, powerful tiger. It's the undisputed king of this kingdom, and for decades, all eyes and a lot of the conservation effort have been focused on protecting it, and for good reason. But what if I told you that just beneath the gaze of that famous tiger, there's a whole other world of predators? A secret world of small, incredibly elusive cats, and each one has its own amazing story of survival. And that is the story we are digging into today. See, for a long time, both the science and the money in conservation have been all about the big, flashy cats, the crowd pleasers. And look, that's been fantastic for tiger recovery for sure. But it's also created this huge blind spot. We've learned so much about the animal at the very top. But what about everyone else in that carnivore community? Well, these smaller cats have a name. They're called mesopredators. And they're not just mini tigers, not at all. Think of them as the essential middle managers of the whole ecosystem. They're the ones controlling populations of rodents and other small animals, basically keeping the entire food web in balance. So the health of these little guys, it's a direct signal of how healthy the entire habitat is. So who exactly are the subjects of our little investigation here? Well, Ranthambhore is actually home to this amazing group of 4 different small cat species, and every single one of them is trying to carve out a life for itself in this really competitive landscape. Okay, let's meet the cast. First up, you've got the Caracal. It's pretty rare and really specialized for forest terrain. Then you have the jungle cat, who's way more adaptable, a generalist, and really isn't too shy about living near people. Next is the Indian desert cat, a total specialist of arid, dry areas. And finally, the rusty spotted cat, which is actually the world's smallest wildcat, and it survives by sticking to really dense vegetation. So you've got 4 totally different playbooks, all trying to win in the same arena.
But here's the thing, this is not an easy place to make a living. These little cats are getting squeezed from 2 different directions, from the very top of the food chain and from the human world pushing in from the outside.
And you can really see why right here. Ranthambhore is not some sealed-off, pristine paradise. You've got these green, protected core areas, yeah, but look, they're surrounded by buffer zones and villages. It's this complex patchwork where the line between wild and human-dominated land gets really, really blurry. This whole situation creates what's basically a double jeopardy for these cats. On one hand, you've got the tigers. They're a direct threat. I mean, they'll hunt and kill smaller carnivores. So a small cat's entire life is about staying off the tiger's radar. Then, on the other hand, you've got all the human pressure. Livestock raising in the area, people coming in to collect resources, and all that activity shrinks their habitat and can actually push them into riskier areas, maybe even closer to the tigers they're trying to avoid. And all of this brings us to the central mystery, the big question. With all this pressure coming from both sides, how on earth do 4 rival species of small cats all manage to survive here? Well, the answer might just lie in a really brilliant ecological theory. This is the exact question that gets scientists started. It frames the entire investigation. See, it's not just about finding the cats. It's about figuring out the invisible rules they all live by. The rules that let them share this incredibly crowded kingdom without wiping each other out.
And the key idea here is something called niche partitioning. Honestly, the roommate analogy is perfect. Think about it. To avoid driving each other crazy, roommates have to work things out. You use the kitchen at different times, you hang out in different rooms. The cats do the same thing. To avoid stepping on each other's toes, they have to figure out a system. Maybe the Caracal takes the rocky hills, while the jungle cat hangs out in the scrubland near farms. That's dividing up the space. Or maybe one is a strict midnight hunter, while another prefers to come out right at sunset. That's dividing up the time.
And this isn't just some casual idea. It's a core principle in ecology. The research is clear. Coexistence like this doesn't just happen by accident. It's an active process of separation, whether by space, by time, or even by what they eat, that allows all these different species to thrive without competing each other into extinction.
Okay, so that's the theory. But how do you actually prove it? I mean, how do you spy on some of the most secretive animals on the planet to figure out their schedules and their territories? Well, it takes some pretty clever detective work. The approach they take is both brilliant and super systematic. First, the team lays out a grid over the entire study area.
Then, in each one of those little squares, they set up a camera trap right along an animal trail. These cameras just sit there, 24/7, like silent, patient observers. And then finally, all of that photographic data, with all the timestamps, gets fed into these powerful computer models that can pull out the hidden patterns. And here's where it gets really clever. These models are designed to account for something called imperfect detection. Think about it. Just because your camera didn't snap a picture of a rusty spotted cat doesn't mean one wasn't there. It could have just walked right behind the camera. So instead of just counting photos, these models calculate the probability that a cat is using that area, which gives us a way more accurate picture of what's really going on.
At the end of the day, this isn't just some abstract academic exercise. Solving this puzzle has huge, real-world consequences for how we go about protecting these incredible ecosystems.
What comes out of this research is going to be a total game changer. For the very first time, conservationists are going to have actual maps showing where these different small cats live. They'll have solid data that shows how they're dividing up space and time. And most importantly, they can pinpoint the critical zones that need to be protected to make sure these overlooked species actually have a future.
Because, look, protecting the tiger is obviously super important, but it's just not enough on its own. A truly healthy ecosystem is a complete ecosystem. And by finally understanding the needs of these other predators, we can shift from just focusing on one famous animal to a strategy that protects the whole complex, interconnected web of life.
And that really leaves us with one last critical question to think about. If true conservation means looking beyond just the star of the show, if it means understanding that quiet, complex dance of survival happening in the shadows, then what happens if we only protect the kings of the ecosystem? What happens to the rest of their kingdom?